Hello and welcome to another great production for philosophy videos. This video is going to focus on Aquinas and his understanding of analogy. This video was made really for upper sixth in mind as a recap for Aquinas Analogy for the 20th century perspectives module. You're going to need to compare Aquinas to Wittgenstein. This video will focus on explaining Aquinas' approach to religious language as revision, so then in lesson we can compare the two together with each other. So to begin with, as a reminder, let's find out what an analogy is. An analogy is a comparison that you make between two things that are different but have similarities. So for example, if you wanted to, you could maybe compare, in an analogy, a philosopher to a light bulb, in case you didn't know what a light bulb looked like. The link that I've tried to make between these two is that both of these help you to see the world in a slightly different way. So the light bulb gives you light to see, and the philosopher hopefully opens your mind to see the world in a new and different, perhaps a better way than you did before. Aquinas, in case you were wondering what he looked like, I'll just show you a little picture. So there's Aquinas. I don't know if it comes up on the video, but there's Aquinas. Aquinas argued that we use analogies when we use religious language to talk about God. This means that religious language for Aquinas is cognitive. Okay? In my last video that I made, I had a yellow pencil that was quite good at pointing out things. I've decided to upgrade to a pencil with little aliens on. I don't know whether you can see the little aliens. Whoa, my hand's shaking. So there's my little alien pencil, see if it works. So, Aquinas uses cognitive language in terms of analogy to talk about God. It's cognitive because it carries information and meaning about God when we talk about Him. You should also know that Aquinas' approach to analogy is often called the cataphatic way or the via positiva. Make sure you know these phrases and this word as well. In the exam specification, they could use any of those 3 ways, 4 ways including analogy, in order to talk about religious language from Aquinas. So make sure you know all 4 of those different phrases and terms. So, for your exam, you'll need to know what they all mean, and the question on the exam could use any of them phrases. So let's have a go at dodgy picture mode to try and explain analogy from the teachings of Aquinas. We're going to start off by drawing, or trying to draw, God. That pen's down. Okay, so here is supposedly God. Okay. Now, for Aquinas, he argues that there's a scale that exists, that's through my dodgy picture mode, and God is at the top of this scale. So if we imagine a scale that trickles downwards, like so. Let's even that up a bit. Now God is up at the top of this scale that goes down towards the bottom, and humanity, as you're guessing, is probably near the bottom around here somewhere. We'll get to that in a minute. Aquinas believes this from the work of Aristotle, when Aristotle talks about the prime mover. For Aquinas, God is pure actuality and total perfection. Nothing's better than God. So only God has the total understanding of what it means to be good, what love is, what it means to be virtuous, how to judge other people on their actions. For the state of the argument that I'm doing, I'm going to use the phrase God is good. Okay? So only God, because he's perfect and total, pure actuality, is totally 100% good. As we move further away from God, our understanding of what goodness is gets less and dilutes, if you like. An ex-student of mine called Hugo, a little shout out to Hugo then, used an analogy to understand this for himself, in which he likened it to orange juice, which I thought was quite clever, so I'm going to steal his analogy and use it. So in your mind, if you think about orange cordial, it's a lot of orange cordial there, don't worry, I'm not going to drink it. This is full concentrate orange cordial or orange squash, and it's the fullness of like God in terms of goodness. Now, as you dilute your cordial and you add water to it, this is exciting, isn't it? There you go. When you dilute the orange, so then it ends up less concentrated, then that's similar to how you move away from God and his total goodness, his love, his justice. So the more dilute your orange squash becomes, the further away you are from God in terms of his knowledge and understanding of things. So, quite a good little analogy there. Cheers, Hugo. God's at the top then. After God, below him, we have, this is my attempt, an angel, plural. So below God there are angels that have an understanding of goodness. Below God and below angels you have humans. Below humans you have animals. Let's put them in. And below animals you have vegetables. I should have used green for vegetable. Never mind. Let's have a pink vegetable called that's my attempt at a lettuce. Should have wrote vegetable, doesn't matter. There you go. So, God's up at the top of the hierarchy. God is complete, full actuality, and he knows everything that's good and goodness is in its full. As you move away down from God in the scale, angels have a slightly less good understanding of what goodness is. Humans have a less understanding of goodness. Animals, a lesser understanding. Vegetation, a lesser understanding. So goodness becomes a hierarchy of these different steps and stages. This is known as, there we go, the analogy of proper proportion, or I'd often just call it the analogy of proportion. Be aware in your exam, the exam specification does say proper proportion. Might be worth using the language that the exam board gives. It's a bit better than just being lazy like I am and just saying proportion. So this is the analogy of the proportion, and that's because God has fullest understanding of what goodness is, and we have a lesser understanding of what goodness is. Therefore, I can say that God is good, and I know in part what that means because it's similar to my understanding of what goodness is. But it's not complete and full understanding of goodness because only God has that ability to know complete and full goodness because he's at the top. The second understanding of analogy that you need to know for your exam from Aquinas is the analogy of attribution. So I'll try and explain that briefly. In order to explain the analogy of attribution, I shall do it through an analogy. So, here's my attempt at an analogy. Imagine you have an artist. Yep. And our artist is painting a picture. Let's say, what would he be painting? I don't know. Dinosaurs, the only thing I can ever think of in my head. So he's painting a diplodocus of sorts. The tail should be higher, but we're not after anatomical correctness. So imagine you have an artist who is painting a picture. Now, in order for us to understand the picture and for the artist to paint it, there'll be an aspect of the artist that is in his painting. So, to try and give you an example of this, there's the artist or an aspect of the artist within their work. If I was to try and show you different famous paintings, so there's one, there's a famous painting. Don't know what it's called, Stars at Night, is it? There's another one, Sunflowers, turn it that way. Ooh. Here's another one, I don't know what it's called, Field with Birds maybe. Here is someone chopping some wheat. Now they are all, oh there's another one, famous one. They're all famous paintings, and there's a particular style behind those paintings and the way in which they look. And if you're smart and clever, and you know, then you'll know all those paintings are by this chap, Vincent van Gogh. I think it's pronounced Van Gogh if you're Dutch, but I don't know. So they're all by Van Gogh, and you can tell they're Van Gogh paintings because they really do look like his style, and an aspect of him is therefore in the paintings. Aquinas argues that the same is true of God. So, God, in a similar way, is trying to create the universe. Let's say this is meant to represent the universe. It's meant to be a little bit of a, I don't know, nebula, galaxy thing going on. Maybe I should have drawn the Earth. Doesn't matter. So, I'll draw the Earth here. Look how accurate that Earth is. Yeah. Okay. So, God's creating the universe there. And in a similar way to how an aspect of the artist is in the painting, there will be an aspect of God within his creation, which is the universe. This analogy of proportion can link ever so slightly to the cosmo and teleological arguments, because when we look at the universe we can see aspects of God in terms of causation, contingency and motion, and also aspects of God in relation to design. It can also link in ever so slightly because God created human beings. Oh, that's a bad drawing there. God created human beings, so this can link in to how Calvin later talked about God giving us a divine spark a knowledge of God within us, because we are created in the image of God according to the book of Genesis. So, as a short little recap for Aquinas on analogy, analogy has two parts to it. You have the analogy of proper proportion, there's a lot of P's, and the analogy of attribution. Analogy of proportion is that it's almost like a scale where God is full and complete goodness. Back to my pencil. And the further you move away from God in terms of his perfection, we have a less understanding of what goodness is, from angels to humans to animals to a vegetable down at the bottom. There's less in terms of goodness as you go down. So that's why it's analogy of proportion, because proportionally we have a smaller or a lesser understanding of what goodness is compared to God, but we can still use the same word in the same way as it carries meaning for us. The analogy of attribution comes in because in the same way how an artist paints a picture and that aspect of the picture is within the artist or comes from the artist, God, who has created the universe and us, has an aspect of God within his creation, so therefore we can identify God and understand God and use analogies to talk of God, because there's parts or aspects of God that are imprinted into his creation. I hope that was of some help to you. It was just a basic recap, if you like, of Aquinas on analogy, and hopefully now you'll be able to use it when we look at a comparison between Aquinas and Wittgenstein. I hope that was helpful. Take care of yourselves, folks, and each other.